Hi, this is Denise with PaperKraftD, and it's Tips and Tricks Tuesday. Today I'm going to show you why I rarely use my paper trimmer anymore. So let's get started. If you're anything like me and plagued with perfectionism, putting aside the paper trimmer in favor of tearing your gorgeous papers can be a bit intimidating. But trust me, it is so freeing and the results are stunning. Ultimately, and most importantly, I really like the subtle texture tearing adds to a project. It's so much more loose and organic than a perfectly cut straight line. That's why in most situations, I prefer to tear rather than trim. Also, it's faster, and that's a huge benefit when you're in the flow of creating. There's something very meditative about tearing that aligns with the creative process. It seems integral to creating rather than separate from it. Meanwhile, trimming, with its precision and measuring, can interrupt that flow and slow you down. Of course, my analytical self likes to think of tearing in two ways: free-form or organic tearing and controlled tearing. With free-form tearing, you're letting go and trusting that whatever you get, like that proverbial box of chocolates, will be just what you need. It's very organic and intuitive. So dig deep for that inner kindergartner and repeat after me. Perfection is overrated. So look at all the beautiful edges that you get with different types of paper. And here's some mulberry paper. And this is really known for tearing really fuzzy. Look at those edges. Aren't they luscious? Look at how fuzzy they are. Just beautiful. Get so much texture that way. So while freeform tearing is pretty intuitive, there are a few tips to keep in mind. In general, thicker paper produces a more dramatic and interesting tear line than thinner paper does. As an exception to every rule, vellum looks lovely torn. And the torn edge becomes opaque, which stands out from the translucent paper. Most paper, like fabric, has a grain. And how a paper tears can differ depending on whether you're going against the grain or with the grain. You can especially see it in this rice paper. You can see that when I tear it this direction, that rice paper tears really easily and smoothly. When I tear it this direction, it gives some resistance and doesn't tear quite as smoothly, but I actually really love that fuzzy edge that you get. And this is watercolor paper. And again, you get that really dramatic tear line because it's such thick paper. Look at this way, even more so. And you can see that it tears differently. It doesn't tear as evenly this direction. So if you're having difficulty tearing a paper and it's doing wonky things and you're not really super happy with the way it's tearing, try turning it 90 degrees and tearing it the other way. You might find it easier to tear on that side rather than the side you're tearing. File folder. Okay, and you can tell that way does not look like it's with the grain. Isn't that pretty? It's a really beautiful edge, torn edge though. And this direction probably is with the grain. Yeah, it's much easier to tear this way than it is to tear the other way. And you get still that really dramatic edge, which is really pretty. And book page tears even more differently. And I really love that too, because you can actually kind of see some of the words kind of coming through the other side, which is really pretty, especially when it's glued down. You get that really beautiful translucent look. And you can see that it's more of a ragged edge when you go this way. And that's because, you know, you're going, I guess, against the grain of the paper. When you're tearing white core cardstock or paper that has a digital printed on it, the edge you hold stationary will have the white border. So I'm holding this one down, it's stationary, I'm moving this piece. The piece that I'm holding down will be the piece that has the white border. As a recovering perfectionist, I rarely tear with absolute abandon, though I admire those who do. Even with free-form tearing, you can somewhat guide the direction of the tear depending on whether you want your paper torn at an angle or straight across the page. I generally do this when I'm free-form tearing because it's so hard to give up control. So for example, in this one, I'll just start it up here and I'll kind of just go a little bit slowly and try to get it to go straight down the page. Okay? If I want more of a tear across the edge like this, well, I'll start up here and I'll kind of move this paper that I'm moving in the direction that I want the tear to go. And then I get, you know, kind of the shape and the length of the tear that I want. So you have a lot more control when you're making a tear than you think you do. So for example, if I want the white torn edge right here, let's say I want to make a corner tuck, I'll hold this down. This is the part that's stationary is the part that gets the torn edge, and then I'll just kind of go like that. And then I have, you know, a little corner tuck. Controlled tearing is a whole nother beast. Since my printer doesn't print borderless without cutting off important bits, I generally have a border that I need to remove before I can start a project. I almost always tear these off these days rather than trim them. And here are some of my tips. When I'm trying to take off just a very small, I'll start on this side because it's a little darker here, but just a very narrow strip like this, what I do is I put the ruler over the top of the page like that, just so I can see the edge. I hold it down firmly, I lift this edge up, and I just tear. Make sure I'm holding it down firmly. And if it starts to get away from me, then I'll just reposition. I can start from the bottom if I need to. And sometimes it's a little bit imperfect. That's okay. It helps if you make it a little bit wider than that because, you know, let's face it, that 1/8 of an inch is a little bit much. And if I go faster, it works a little bit better. But I just take all of these edges off, just like that. All right, so I have to say, this may seem somewhat obvious to most people that you put the ruler down on this small portion and tear from the big. I can't tell you how many times I tried to do the exact opposite thing, hold the paper down like this, and then try tearing from up here. I can't even grab it with my fingers. It was just an exercise in frustration. Okay. And I use this method to, you know, tear all sorts of stuff. I mean, if I have a kit like this, I will go ahead and, you know, tear you know, I have tried tearing these, but they don't turn out as nice as I like. So I generally just use a pair of scissors on this. It's pretty easy to pull the scissors out for this. But you notice that there's like literally no measuring. There are no numbers involved in this at all. So, you know, if you are not by nature a numbers person, tearing's great. You don't have to worry about any, you know, any of the the numbers that you know, will have on your paper trimmer. So, you know, these are just, you know, using a straight edge to kind of tear. Yeah, and again, I really love this Tim Holtz ruler as a means to do this because it is completely transparent all the way through. Like I said, it has these markings every 1/8 of an inch lengthwise all the way down, so you can measure it and you can line, you know, everything up perfectly. You know, even if you didn't have a, you know, could see that, but you can see where this where the printable ends, so that's really cool. The other thing is that this edge right here, I don't know if you can see it. Let me see. I'm gonna have to show it like that. Can you see how the edge is tapered right here? It's tapered down. Yeah. So it tapers down. So that provides a really nice edge for really getting some precision tears. I don't know. Precision tear, is that like a term? I don't know. But I like it for this purpose. You can go all crazy and use an actual tear ruler. But I actually don't do this very often, to tell you the truth. Let's see what, for one, I can't see through it, so I can't see if I'm really getting it straight. Not that it really matters all that much. I just find it harder to, now see, I'm tearing right here. So you got to tear a little bit closer to the ruler itself. And I don't know, I mean, that looks okay. It just doesn't look all that natural to me. And see how this is not a very straight edge. So I'm not super, I have to say, super thrilled with the tear rulers. I can try the bigger edge and see if I like that. This, in this direction, seems to work a little bit easier. So yeah, that definitely works a little bit easier than this smaller side. But I don't know, I rarely ever use this tear ruler, unfortunately. I really just kind of like my Tim Holtz ruler. It just seems to me a lot easier to be able to, first of all, see that it's straight, and then have a lot more control over the tear. I just want to point out that, remember, the side that you keep stationary will be the one that has the white edge. So for example, if I'm holding this down like this and pulling from this little trim piece that we're taking off here is the part that will have the white edge. So if you want the white edge to be on, like, say, this portion, you know, and it won't be a really significant white edge. It'll be a pretty subtle white edge. You can turn the paper over, and I just use the 1/4 inch mark on this because it's a little easier to tear than the 1/8 inch. And you can see you get a very, very subtle little tear line there. Can you see that? You can see a very subtle amount of white that's tearing. And I'll just do that around all four sides. And you can see that this is, you know, this is what you get if you do it that way. This is what you get if you do it the other way. You can see the difference here in the back. So this is I tore off from the back. This I tore off from the front. This one doesn't have as much white. This one has, you know, a little bit more white here, you can see. So just two different ways. Neither one's right or wrong. It's just, you know, what you're looking for and, you know, the kind of edge that you want and how much texture you want and what you're going for. Okay, so what do I do if I want to add it to the front of this card? So I want a little bit of a border. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of fold down this piece using this as a guide so that it's nice and straight. That'll keep it nice and straight. And then I am going to, tear off this portion here. And then I'll do the same thing on the bottom. Use the side as a guide. There we go. Okay, so now if I were doing this in the front, the one you hold down gets the white, right? So that's kind of flip-flopped when you're doing it on the back. So I'm going to hold down the opposite piece because I want the white on this piece, and I'm going to tear it like that. And then you can see I just get just a slight bit of that edge there. And you get this really beautiful kind of torn look with the interesting edges, but that's still kind of the shape that you want it to be. So this is what I would call a more controlled tear. The other thing I wanted to show you is that, if you're at a top of the book like this and you're trying to tear a page out, it's pretty easy to tear, page out without getting too much tearing. If you're more in the back of the book, let's see, it's a little harder to get it to tear without, doing something wonky like that, right? So what I've found that really does help is that I just take my ruler and I put it into the seam, and then again, I use that as a guide. And it's not perfect. I mean, it's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but it is, I do seem to get better results, especially if I go a little bit slower than, especially in the middle of the book, than if I just try to start tearing, because oftentimes it'll just tear like right there, which I do not want. So, okay. The other thing I wanted to show you, which maybe, again, like I said, for some people, this is incredibly intuitive and they've known this all along. So if you've known this all along, well, go you. But for me, it's embarrassing that I just didn't know this. So if I want to connect these two books together, for example, these two book pages together. Let's say that I've gone ahead and You know, I've glued them. I'm hanging it up right there. But I don't really necessarily love the way those edges are looking right there. In the past, I would take this washi tape and I just put it along the edge, you know, up here, you know, kind of line it up. And I'd overlap the page and then I'd have to trim it. Well, if I keep the edge clean straight across and I go down like this, now I take my ruler, ha, voila, look at that. And it's perfect. And then my edge is always straight, you know, but there's times when you want a wonky edge on your, washi, but not when you're doing something like this. You want it to go from the top to the bottom. And you can't just fold it right over because then it won't catch that edge over here. This is so easy and so much faster than what I was doing before. I cannot even tell you how much easier it is. And there's times when I use tape like this, when I'm putting things together in my books, and you know, I use this kind of thicker tape. Go to the other side and I just do the same thing. You know, it works with washi, it works with any kind of tape that you're using. Look at that. It's so easy. I don't know how I didn't discover this earlier, but it saves so much time. I love it. I really genuinely love it. Okay, so there's other things you can do with tearing. So say, for example, I want to tear out this. I don't want to get my scissors and fussy cut. But when you're fussy tearing, again, to help control what you're tearing, you want to put your finger down on the part that you do not want to tear. So that's staple, and then you tear around it like this, you know, and this isn't like super duper precision. So that would be like an example of fussy tearing. So the other option, and I'm going to zoom in so you can really see what I'm doing here, is that I'm taking a water pen, or you can just use, you know, a pen with some, a paintbrush with a pot of water, but a water pen's actually pretty easy. And all I'm doing is adding a little line of water along the outside of this. You don't want to saturate. This is not watercolor paper, so I don't want to saturate it too much. But, you know, that gives you a little bit more of a control over where this tears. So you can get a little closer results, I think, with this. A little closer to that line. Okay, so you can see kind of the difference here. This is one where I used the water, and this is the one where I didn't use the water. You can see I get a little closer, more detailed tear than I did with this one. You know, and you can use this water method for trying to do any kind of controlled tear that you'd like. So say, for example, you know, you want to do, you know, a corner tear. You didn't want to do whoops, I put a little bit too much. You didn't want to just have the tear that I was showing you earlier. You didn't want to have anything quite like this. You want to have a little bit more precise. Well, you can do it just like this. And there you have a very precise cut. It's still, or a precise tear. It still has some of those really cool fuzzy edges. You're getting a little bit of the white, but it's, you know, exactly the shape you want it to be. You know, you can do an oval. There we go. And it's not like a perfect oval, but you know, you can also just take off some of these little wet edges if you'd like. I think it's pretty close. You've got those really kind of cool fuzzy edges. Of course, I didn't draw like a perfect oval either. So if you used, you know, something that's actually precise and went around it like that, well then, you know, you could get a more precise circle. There you go. Well, that's a pretty good looking circle right there, actually. And it has that really cool kind of, when it dries, it'll have that really cool kind of fuzzy edge to it, which is really nice. So those are my tips and tricks for today. Like I said, I'm on a tear, and you know, honestly, I really much prefer to use elements that have this tearing, that are torn rather than just cut in with precision, and you know, just adds a kind of an interesting textural element to clusters and you know, any kind of element that you're adding, any kind of ephemera you're adding to a journal, just adds that little bit more of an interest that I really like. I really think it's pretty cool looking. So anyhow, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you found these tips and tricks useful, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. If you have any tips that you use, please, by all means, let me know. I am still trying to move beyond my perfectionism, and I keep telling myself that perfection is overrated. So that is my inner mantra: perfection is overrated, perfection is overrated. And honestly, you get a lot of really interesting results when you can kind of just let go and be free like that, and some really pleasant surprises. So anyhow, yeah. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please subscribe to my channel. Again, this is Denise with PaperKraftD, and craft on.